Restaurant workers are being ripped off, say these protesters, because they aren't guaranteed minimum wage.
In 43 states, employers are allowed to pay tipped workers less, some as little as $2.13 an hour.
That's not a wage. It's barely enough to buy a large cup of coffee.
The celebrities plus union protests convinced voters and politicians in several states that the government must insist on a higher minimum for tipped workers.
This would be more fair for all workers, specifically for minorities and women.
They always say that. It's to help minorities and women.
How is everything today?
But Waitress Alcieli Felipe is a minority and a woman.
Coffee? Sure.
She says don't change the rules on tips.
We have spaghetti and meatballs.
Thanks to tips, Alcieli makes much more than minimum wage.
Free refill, you're good. I'll make $25 an hour. By the end of the year, I made around $48,000 to $50,000.
Take this for you.
If you raise the minimum wage, it will be harder for restaurants to keep the same amount of employees.
No, say the so-called public interest lawyers. We have to have a law.
The problem with tips is that they're very inconsistent.
Law professor Nicole Hallett leads social justice protests. This one demanding that tipped workers be paid that higher minimum wage.
Require restaurant owners to pay the same hourly wage that all other employers have to pay.
Save our jobs!
But many restaurant workers say don't raise the minimum. A higher minimum threatens our jobs.
The cost of having a restaurant is not cheap. For my boss to pay all her employees, she'll have to cut employees. The boss boy will be cut.
Hallett is unconvinced.
I simply don't believe that increasing the minimum wage for tipped workers will lead in a reduction in the restaurant workforce. Studies have shown that restaurants have been able to bear those costs. Someone has to clear the plates.
But in New York, after the last minimum wage increase, 270 restaurants closed.
Restaurants always close. The industry is doing just fine.
Restaurants don't always close.
Michael Saltzman works for an employer group that fights minimum wage increases.
Yeah, there's turnover in the industry, but what we're doing now is we're taking an industry where there's low profit margins, we're dramatically increasing labor costs, and we're jacking up restaurant closures. If in the Bay Area you've got a 14% increase in restaurant closures for each dollar increase in the minimum wage, something's not right.
That isn't right, but the media is all about workers who are unhappy.
And go home with no money.
I don't think that it's fair for a worker to struggle to pay rent, to struggle to make groceries.
One study found that 46% of tipped workers nationwide rely on public benefits.
Like food stamps. But even Hallett admits many are only eligible because a lot of people don't report tip income.
Many restaurants and restaurant workers often don't report 100% of their income. So the fact that they're
getting benefits doesn't mean anything. It just means that they're cheating the taxpayer. Alcieli says she doesn't cheat, but many other people do.
Lots of people make cash money, tip only. Tons of restaurants do that. Have a great day, hon.
Those who demand higher minimums also claim eliminating tips will reduce sexual harassment. Another argument embraced by the media.
90% of restaurant workers report experiencing sexual behavior that is scary or unwanted. It is
90%.
90%. Tipping is pretty dependent on her willingness to touch or be touched.
This will reduce sexual harassment?
Sexual harassment has nothing to do with the state's tipping system. And it's not me saying that, it's the federal government saying that.
A study using federal data did find that states that raised the minimum actually had increases in sexual harassment. The states that did what you want, there are more charges of sexual harassment.
Sexual harassment is a very complicated problem, and no single policy is going to eliminate that problem.
Okay, so raising the minimum probably won't affect sexual harassment, but it will force some restaurants to fire workers and force some to close. Since prices will be higher, tips will go down. This is supposed to be good for restaurant workers?
Save our jobs!
No wonder so many oppose what the activists demand.
Just keep as it is, we're fine. Who are those people? Have they worked in a restaurant industry?
She hasn't. And all this makes me ask, why should there be any minimum? Why can't the employer and the employee make whatever deal they want?
Well, that policy has been rejected. It's something that has been rejected for the last 100 years, and we're not in that world right now.
We sure aren't. We're in a world where activists and government protect workers even when they don't want that protection.